Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio radio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast, in your car or your truck as you're driving along, or in public transport. Stick in those earbuds and sit back and take it all in. Now, this essay is about why so many Indians, including, by the way, quite well-to-do and wealthy Indians, the Brahmin class and so on, why they're so desperate to leave India, to get out of India. I guess there's a few issues to cover here, and they go across a bit of a spectrum, but Indians have this astonishing ability to claim their own country as an absolute basket case shithole that they wouldn't piss on, whilst at the same time, these same Indians maintain a degree of, or an attitude of, moral and spiritual and genetic superiority. Now, if indeed there is such a superior race or caste within a race, why don't they stay in India to fix India and turn India into but that isn't on the radar. And I want to cover some of the reasons why these people say that why should they stay in India and make it a better country? Why? Well, why should they do that? So there's a few things. The Brahmin class believe, which is the top 5% less of the population. Remember, we're talking a population of 1.5 billion. 5% still quite a few people, but they insist that they're really the only net taxpayers in India. And when they talk about net taxpayers, they don't just mean that they pay taxes, because the taxes are high, but the loopholes for avoidance are similarly high. Not only pay taxes, but they have to pay the biggest bribes to get things done. So they consume PhDs at university, for example, and they rail about, we have to pay big bribes to get these PhDs. We have to pay big bribes to get degrees. We have to pay big bribes to get masters from university and so on. We have to pay all these bribes to all these different people. And they say, well, that's effectively a tax, which you could argue that it is, but so they say, well, we're the net taxpayers. We pay the most. So why should we have to tolerate high levels of pollution, crumbling infrastructure, poor quality healthcare, poor quality education? If we want, for example, if we want to put our children to now I don't know how they classify a good school. I think it means that they don't get lower class people amongst the students. I think that's really what they mean, rather than an education of quality in itself, as in quality learning. But they say that's really expensive. So everywhere we look, we have to pay money for government services that we don't really get anything out of because of the low quality. And again, I think they equate low quality meaning that people of lower social classes attended. So there's a slightly different view of what, my view, for example, in the West of poor quality education is that it's not rigorous in the areas that matter, such as English and mathematics and so on. I don't think that's what they mean by it, or not as I understand it, at least. They think it's quite acceptable to bribe someone to get a PhD, even though you haven't done any work and you wouldn't pass a test to save your life. So slightly different take on that. But nonetheless, they say, well, why should I stay in India and pay these taxes when I don't really get a benefit from it? Or more importantly, actually, is where that benefit benefits others that I do not approve of. My taxes and the money I pay out will benefit people in the lower social structure, the lower end of the social structure in their Indian caste system. Why should I pay my taxes to help them? That's wrong. So they see it as a moral issue, whereas I don't mind, paying taxes for the common good, for example, where we will all benefit from the road, or we will all benefit from a better quality school or something. I see the greater benefit there, because people will be, for example, people that may not read very well will get a better quality education, assuming other things being equal, in Australia or the West get a better quality education at schools. Therefore, there is a better qualified workforce. Therefore, everyone will benefit from a more literate, more capable, more articulate workforce. Is my wider angle view of things. They don't see it that way. What is their family, their tribe, their class, their caste? How does that benefit? And if they don't perceive a benefit, and more importantly, not only that they don't perceive a benefit to themselves, but they perceive that they're paying for benefit that others may get. Very Indian, this, by the way, and so they're opposed to that. Now, that doesn't mean in the West people don't think, well, why should I pay benefits for illegal immigrants, for example? Why should that come out of my taxes? But that's a different thing. Those are people who shouldn't be there anyway. So, but the Indian view is these lower class people, well, they kind of shouldn't. They really exist anyway. They're nothing but a drag on everything, and they shouldn't really exist. So they go through the issues here. So quality of life is a big thing on the Indian, particularly the better off Indians, is pollution, poor infrastructure, overcrowding. They say, well, these things, including the cost of services such as healthcare, to get quality healthcare and education, you've got to pay money for it. And again, they talk about bribery being tantamount to taxes. These people aren't paid well enough, whether they be academics at university or whatever. These people aren't paid well enough, so we have to bribe them to get anything done that we want done. So they again classify all that in tax. So this idea of quality of life is a huge factor, the Indians say, in why they want to leave India. Now, there's other factors too here. For example, the most prestigious, well-paid jobs that aren't being given through corruption, and where the employers are insisting on merit-based hiring, for example, which is not much of the hiring, but so they advertise it in the newspapers. They're talking. There was one example here that was mentioned. In fact, this actually, a guy did a video on this, where it's one of the better paid IT jobs in India, and there were 90,000 applicants. Now, I don't know how many of those were just dreamers or wishful thinkers or whatever, but the allegation is that almost 5% of those supposedly had MBAs. Nearly a quarter of the applicants had masters, and more than a third had degrees. Now, I don't know about how reliable these numbers are, but if that is the case, there's a vast number of MBAs running around India with I would suggest certainly every MBA I have met or worked with from India has not had the MBA. They just bribe someone to get it. They do not have it. It's simply a social status badge that upper class Indians have, and they bribe someone to get it. They haven't worked hard or busted their ass studying or anything like that. Now, I'm sure there are some that have, but certainly none of the ones that I've ever met. Now, annual employment in IT jobs in the, remember, 1.5 billion population, the annual in the entire continent of India, or subcontinent, the number of IT jobs, again, which includes crappy call center jobs, is between 50 and 100,000 per annum. We also have to remember that hardly any of these jobs are generically or organically struck. It's just Western companies outsourcing jobs to India. That's the only reason why they've got an IT sector of any note at all. Now, remember, in the whole of India, between 50 and 100,000 jobs per annum are being created. Now, that's the net new jobs being created. If you look at the loss of jobs overall, typically the number of jobs are going backwards by anywhere from 10% plus per annum. So they're not creating a net number of new jobs in IT. So the argument, therefore, is there's no employment opportunities for Indians, all these people running around with MBAs and, excuse me, they've got nowhere to go. If the only job you can get is flipping burgers or a barista or so on, then what's the point? Because there's no, remember, we're not talking just employment opportunities, we're talking about prestigious employment opportunities, which again brings us back to the Brahmin upper caste view and attitudes to things. So they say, well, we have to go to the West to get jobs. Now, any job you get in the West, pretty much, provided it's a white-collar job, any job is considered prestigious in the West. And, in Australia, at least the government has quotas and budgets. I mean, Indians walking straight off the plane or the boat are walking straight into public service jobs based on quotas. None of them would get these jobs based on merit hiring, but they're being gifted these jobs. And in any organisation that relies on government contracts has got a heavy preponderance of Indian employees. Again, none of whom have got the job through any form of merit. Nonetheless, in India, the upper class sees themselves as entitled to prestigious employment. And in India just isn't generating those jobs, it's argued, so they have to leave India and get out. Now, we need to understand that something in the region of 90% of Indians in totality are still working in either the agricultural or the black informal economy, such as household servants and fetch and carry flunkies on the street, courier delivery, that sort of thing. Now, a lot of the Indians who come to Australia do that as well, do those sort of jobs, again, for scam labour hire firms, often run by Indians. So the argument is that the West has quality jobs, meaning white-collar jobs and air-conditioned offices. The West has quality jobs, so you want a quality job, you have to leave India and go to the West. So some of the Indians that have gone to the United States and, say, reached senior levels of the IT industry, they're kind of icons. People have posters of them. Indian sort of kids have posters of them in their houses to worship, and so that's my goal. I want to be like that. But this is all sort of a crazy fantasy myth, and I think it's encouraging a lot of Indians to come to the West based on this myth. Now, one of the supposed Indian icons, who's just a manufactured creature of the globalists. I mean, the guy wouldn't be anywhere if he was operating under his own steam. And I've listened to interviews that he's done where, I mean, if he is a genius, then I can't see it. Maybe I'm too stupid to notice it. That's a possibility, I guess. So this Indian guy comes to the US in his early 20s, walks straight into the most prestigious universities. Now, he comes from a wealthy family where, bribing to get your degrees from Indian universities is just how things are done. It's not a matter of shame or anything like that. It's just how things are done. So he comes from these places, walks straight into these prestigious colleges, where he then gets honours heaped upon him, MBAs from Harvard and all this sort of stuff. Then he's hired straight out of now he's 12 years, so he spent 13 years at university, and so his family's quite well to do. Now he's hired straight into a very well paid, prestigious role in one of the international management consulting firms, which happens to be consulting on the finance and so on of organising BlackRock and State Street type finance for some of these internet firms. And now what he would know about any of that's quite beyond me, given he was allegedly an engineer. So he gets hired straight into this international management consulting firm, then hired straight out of there into one of the most prestigious jobs imaginable in one of the big internet firms. Now he walks straight into a very high level job, and with no relevant experience at all. I just walked straight into it. So again, very suspicious. Clearly, he's a globalist stooge, and behind the scenes, BlackRock's demanding he gets given, big roles and so on. And then he's CEO of this company at the age of 41. And of course, he sends back to India to the village of his ancestors to marry the arranged marriage childhood sweetheart thing. And so she comes out, and so he's married, genetically married. Yeah. Now, yeah, and he's touted as again in India, he's the poster boy. This is what you aspire to. But there's a wider issue here with how we understand nationalism in the world today. Now, nationalism typically means, your belief in your history, your shared history, your institutions, shared experiences, and all that sort of thing. And that sort of nationalism is, and the globalists are chasing it away as fast as they can. That sort of nationalism is being crushed and destroyed, undermined, subverted, and attacked from all sides. And it's really nationalism is defined by the Western white nationalism of again particularly in the the scientific age onwards, and it's based on technological superiority and things like that. But the difference today is Indian nationalism, or the sort of nationalism that you see coming out of the third world and about India and that sort of thing, isn't based on those sort of things anymore. Particularly the upper class Indians and many others besides, they can sneer at the country, the India's institutions. They can sneer at its infrastructure. They can sneer at its corruption. They can sneer at the corrupt and useless government. They can sneer at other classes, as in social classes of people. They can sneer and deride everything about India, everything, and say, well, we've got to get out of this place. It's a fucking shithole. It's going nowhere. Nothing's ever going to get better. And why should we stay around to make it better when people other than us may benefit? So let's go to the West. Those people already built up their advanced society, so we'll go and parasite off them. Now, the Indian concept of nationalism and other third world countries, it's not just uniquely Indian, but I'll use the Indian example given they've got this caste system which accentuates this idea of the new nationalism, and that's a nationalism that's based on in the Indian case at least Hindu nationalism, genetic purity, thus by extension a nationalism, and spiritual superiority, spiritual moral superiority. So this is the new nationalism. Now, what this means is Indians can move anywhere in the world as a group and maintain this neo-nationalism anywhere they go. They can deride India and its institutions to the nth degree, but still maintain everything about the Indian spiritual, genetic, and moral diaspora, and take it anywhere in the world. Thus they create sub nations within nations. And as the old concept of nationalism, again, the Western concept of belief in institutions and so on and so forth, and shared history, shared culture. The Indians, to some extent, I suppose, shared culture they have, but this idea of nationalism based in belief in institutions and shared experiences around those cultural institutions, that's disappearing now. Again, aggressively being dismantled by the globalists. But the neo-nationalism of the Indians and the Africans and the Caribbeans, as hollow and ridiculous it is, they can go to any other country in the world and yet maintain their racial solidarity, maintain their racial communities, maintain their sense of entitlement, maintain their sense of moral and spiritual superiority in a completely different, a foreign country, and see nothing inconsistent with that. Similarly, they can argue that India is, or Africa, or wherever they come from, is a hopeless basket case. But why should we do anything about that? Why should I work hard to make things better for someone else? Why don't I go to an advanced economy where things are already better and I don't have to do it, and I can just extract wealth to put in my pocket, and I can take and expect handouts and so that's the new nationalism. And it's, is nationalism really the right word? Neo-nationalism, neo-community, but whether it's Arabs and we see the recent riots in Britain, or whether it's Pakistanis, it doesn't matter. but they can transplant their sense or concept of nationalism. And whereas the European concept of nationalism, if you could even call it that, was transplanted via technology and administrative procedures, such as courts and that sort of stuff. So we're talking about two very different concepts of nationalism and what it means. Would Indians fight and die for their country? Probably not, because they don't believe in it. So the nationalism, because Indians, I mean, when white people went to these countries in Africa and India and so on, whether it be initially as traders rather than colonial, setting up colonial outposts, these third world peoples were staggered that the English infantry with bayonets extended would just walk forward straight into fire. They were quite prepared to die for what they believed in. And this was something the Indians just didn't understand. That they just, wow, why do these people do this? And really that attitude is still prevalent today, except that Western nationalism, the idea of you would fight and die and put your life on the line for what you believe in terms of your nation and so on, that's disappearing. So this third world nationalism, neo-nationalism, is really, given the mass migration, is now replacing that. Where that's going to lead, it'll be an interesting exercise. You've been with Tassos today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.